Hey everyone, I'm Chris Lesniak,
And I'm Rob Byer, and this is
the Debate Math Podcast.
Debating Mathy topics and Mathy pedagogy with Mathy people just like you.
Let's get into this month's debate.
Welcome, everyone, to the Season 3 finale.
As we've done in the past, we wanted to end the year by bringing together a few of our guests from past debates for a roundtable to reflect on those debates and engage in a discussion around the question, how do we help students feel they belong in math class?
Let's not waste any time and get straight to our guests. Our first guest is returning from our first debate of the season, the debater who wants us to ditch the textbooks, a 21-year classroom veteran teacher with experience as a learning coach and a mentor teacher who has taught every grade 1st to 12th in a variety of specialties, including special education, instrumental music, science, and of course, math. She's the author of Unraveling School. She enjoys reading, writing, running, and baking bread. It's Melissa Dean. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, guys. Great to be here.
Can you remind us where you are and what your current role is?
Sure. So I am currently teaching grade 9, 10, and 11 at a tiny high school in a tiny town called Niverville in the province of Manitoba in Canada. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the geography of that, Manitoba is directly north of North Dakota, right by the border. And so, I teach high school. Right now I teach grade 9 math and grade 11 biology, and I have a grade 10 interdisciplinary classroom that involves science, English, and geography, taught through project-based learning and an inquiry-based model, which I also bring into my math classroom. So that's what I do every day. I'm still ditching the textbook. But I would say, I wouldn't say I haven't changed my mind, because I am still ditching the textbook, and it does still make me feel a little bit like on the inside when I see the math textbooks come out. But I will say I do appreciate and am appreciating more for some of my students, and we'll talk about that later in tonight's podcast, actually, the structure that some things like a textbook can provide for some kids. So certainly still on the not following my textbook, but using a textbook-like structure is helping some of my kids be successful.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
A textbook-like structure. I want to hear more in a second. But let's move on. So returning from episode 27 is a debater who eloquently argued that the science of math does not show us the way forward. She's an international expert on how the brain learns and co-author of the best-selling book, Brain-Based Learning with Dr. Eric Jensen. She has a rich background of 25 years in education that includes creating new schools, leading whole school reforms, delivering workshops to educators, and speaking at conferences. She is passionate about helping educators understand how the brain learns and the conditions the brain needs to be at its best for students learning math. It's Liesl McConchie. Hi, Liesl.
Woo-hoo. Hey, it's so great to be here again.
So great to have you back. And can you remind us where you are and what your current role is?
Yeah, I am in sunny San Diego, and I am an independent consultant. So I am working with schools all over the world, helping them to align their pedagogy with what you just said, how the brain naturally learns and the conditions that the brain needs in order to learn at its best. So that's what I'm doing. My little project, my little giant project that I'm finishing up this week is I'm finishing up the manuscript of my next book, which is all about building a positive math identity, a brain science approach to the concept of math identity, which I'm really excited to share with the world.
Awesome. I look forward to that coming out. And your debate was about the science of math, and you were arguing against it. Has anything changed or grown in your perspective since then?
Well, something has changed. As I predicted, the website that calls itself the Science of Math, or the movement that calls itself the Science of Math, has attempted to publish some research. Well, they have published some research that they are claiming makes some connections between timed math tests and math anxiety. And as I predicted, there is a very loose definition that's being used around timed math tests, which is different than the paradigm that most math teachers think of. Like a time math test, we often think of like those Mad Minute math worksheets or any kind of worksheets, like a bunch of math questions on it with a really specific time that's done independently. and in just, a really covert kind of way, a really loose definition of like, hey, kids playing math games together, where that has, for a certain amount of time being called a timed math activity, and showing that in fact didn't cause math anxiety, which I think many people would agree that a social-based math game wouldn't in fact increase timed math or math anxiety. So just continue to bring awareness to us being really critical thinkers and being really thoughtful as we examine research, and being really careful not to just take things with a headline and extrapolate that to mean more than it actually might mean. And just that the balance is still needed to understand the science of learning along with the humanity of the learner as we work to support our students.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. There's so much to unpack there. Our next guest is returning from episode 28, where she argued that schools should switch to a 4-day week. She's a mathematics coach and consultant who supports K-12 learners, teachers, administrators, and more across the country. A conference speaker, a Twitter loudmouth, which if you meet her, never mind, and an avid bookworm and a musical theater enthusiast. It is Shelby Strong. Welcome back, Shelby.
I don't know if I'm feeling too welcome right now, Rob.
Hey, can you remind us where you are and what your current role is?
Absolutely. I'm coming to you tonight from the heart of the Commonwealth in Worcester, Massachusetts, but always and forever will be a New Orleans girl. I am no longer a Twitter loudmouth. I am now a Blue Sky loudmouth. So it's still a loudmouth, just new platform. I am working with K-12 schools, as you mentioned, across the country to support them with their math instruction, particularly problem-based learning, helping teachers to shift their mindsets to try on math, to actually get to do some math themselves and to see what that feels like as a learner before being expected to go and do that in their classrooms with students. And yeah, speaking at conferences and bringing people along for the ride to better, more competent, confident mathematical thinking.
Now, you were on the debate about a 4-day school week. Has your thinking changed or shifted at all since then?
Not particularly. I still do believe that we need a 4-day week, but I also think that we need to divest from capitalist structures that make us believe that we need to be working for 5 days. That, that if we're moving in the world in such a way that everything is revolving around how we show up to work, well, that's currently not working. It's not working for our students if their families are not working a traditional 9-to-5 job. And even the ones who are working a traditional 9-to-5 job, it's 9 to 5. School day didn't end at 5. So still very much believe that we need to rethink this whole education thing and what we're doing and how we're doing it. But I know that it's a much bigger issue than 4 days a week, but it's a nice place to start.
Thank you. It's always great to have you back.
And next up, hear from our most recent debate, who shared her thoughts on how and when politics has a role in math class. She's an educator, a dope human being doing dope things in life and in work. And you can always count on her to ask, what do the students think? It's Crystal Watson. Hi, Crystal.
Hey.
Can you remind us where you are and what your current role is?
I am in the Cincinnati, Ohio. I am currently a principal at a PK through 6 building. I keep saying PK through 5 because there's some switches going on, but PK through 6 building.
And last time you were with us on the last episode, you were on a panel about politics in math class. I'm just curious, has your thinking changed or grown at all since that discussion?
No. Not that politics, so I'll say the same thing kind of that I said in the episode, that it's not about like as shallow as Democrat and Republican. It's about like the politics of life and the politics of moving through, like Shelby said, a capitalistic system. And that's really what we're doing, is we're turning students through a system in order to make them good capitalists. So yeah, politics still has a place in math class, and it's going to rear itself, whether that's what you call it or not.
Thank you.
And lastly, from episode 33, is a debater who argued that an NCTM membership is worthwhile. He's a high school math teacher since 2005, a co-author of the Math Teacher's Toolbox and Practical Algebra, a self-teaching guide, and the 2002 winner of the Math for America Mueller Award for Professional Influence in Education. The former chair of NCTM's Nominations and Election Committee, he listens to a lot of audiobooks in his spare time and plans to write novels someday. It's Bobson Wong. Welcome back, Bobson.
Thank you for having me again.
Can you remind us all where you are and what your current role is?
So I teach math at Bayside High School in Queens. Been there for 18, 19 years. What I teach varies, but it's usually AP statistics, and this year it's geometry and algebra 2.
And you were debating in favor of joining NCTM. Are there any updates or any other takes you have since you were on the podcast?
Not a lot of updates. Just, I think the events of the last week and have made me realize just how important it is for educators, particularly classroom teachers, to have a community that where they feel welcome, where they feel safe. And it's really important for us to take control of the structures that we have, that we can control, and use that to support us. So I think NCTM is an organization that can fit into that structure. And I think, just look at the collapse, the demise of Twitter, right? And I think it's just a reminder of how fragile our support systems for teachers are. And we need something that's a little more stable, a little more durable, and something that can really advocate for us as teachers.
Thank you. And on that note of community, let's get into a debate about belonging.
Prior to tonight's recording, we asked all of you to ponder the question, how do we help students feel that they belong in math class?
So we'd like to hear from each of you briefly, and we're going to work backwards through the order that we introduced you all in. So we're going to start here with Bobson Wong. Bobson, how do we help students feel they belong in math class? The floor is yours.
So I had two thoughts about having students belong in math. The first one is something that I think a lot of people talk about and have written about, and building relationships with students. But that to me is kind of well known. But something that I've been thinking a lot more about lately is something that's a little more teacher centered, and that's thinking about self-care. Thinking about us as educators. What are we doing to take care of ourselves and to build a sense of community for ourselves? Because that gets to having us think about what our beliefs about teaching math are. If we think that math is just something that we give to students, that we just pour knowledge into an empty vessel, then they're not going to belong, because they're just going to feel like that the math is being imposed on them. If we view math as something that's playful, something that can be built around a community, something that engages students and their communities, then our approach towards teaching math is going to be very different. So I think that thinking about how we view ourselves as math teachers, how we view math, what we believe about math, is something that will help students feel like they belong. Because if we feel like we belong in math, then we can help our students belong in math as well.
Thank you, Bobson. Next, we're going to hear from Crystal Watson. Crystal, it's all you.
Real quick. First of all, from an admin perspective, I implore admin to listen to teachers and observe in a non-evaluative way to see what skills need to be honed in on. A lot of teachers are out here just trying to do their best. Most of them are not coming to school like, today I'm going to mess somebody's children up. So they're trying to do their best out here. So one thing that I've done as an admin is really observe and see what I think my teachers need, and then talk to them to see if that truly is a need, and then get their resources in. So I'm going to give a quick shout out to Jamie Reister. She is our elementary math coach. She works directly with my building this year. And I have a very tenured, wonderful teacher that is new to my building this year. A different population, different demographics. And she is really open to learning. So Jamie came in and we've got dates set up where they're going to sit, they're going to learn how to work with manipulatives to shore up gaps instead of just what the book, the textbook, as Melissa says, is asking for, but really what manipulatives are needed. So that's one thing, is pouring into our teachers, making sure that we're honing their skills, because nobody's arrived. And when we do, it's something has changed, right? And we need to do something else with our skills. So what we were good at last year might not suffice this year. From a student's perspective, I think once a teacher feels like they belong in that space, to kind of what Bobson was saying, once a teacher feels like they belong in the space, it's more likely that they'll be able to do that for others. And that looks like really valuing all thinking and all processing, right? So whether it be silent processors, so I don't always need to see every step of your work for me to know that you're engaged in the work, and kind of setting aside the right answer for the process at first. Again, like on another podcast, I had to say, please don't come after me. Right answers matter, but let's focus on the process first so that we can honor the ways in which students get to the answer that they get to, whether it's right or wrong, in order for them to feel like they're valued in the space and belong there.
Thank you, Crystal. And next up is Shelby. Shelby, take it away.
So I thought I knew how to answer this question, but to echo Crystal's point, there's the things that I think that I do that are effective, and then there's what's actually received. So I reached out to some former students and some teachers that I've worked with to ask them what were some things that I did to help create this. And from my students, what I heard was how much it mattered how we started off the year. So at the beginning of the year, we would start with not class rules, but class guidelines that I shamelessly stole from one of my colleagues. And so it was about attentive listening, appreciation, mutual respect, and integrity. And so we started the year grounding ourselves in those 4 guiding principles and really leaning into what does that mean for us to share this mathematical space together. And another big thing that my students heard from me quite a lot was, you have a right to an opinion in my class, but your opinion stops at your nose. What you don't have the right to have is an opinion on someone else's humanity. And so by setting that expectation of how we show up to the space together, that helped create a sense of belonging, because my students apparently learned that I'm going to honor them the moment they walk in the door, however they are. Whatever they do, whoever they are in that moment, they're coming into this space, and we're going to be in this space together, and we're going to be a community, and we're going to respect one another. And now we're going to get to some math. And the math was a conduit almost for how to see the world and how to move through the world. And then when I talked to some of the teachers that I work with, one of the things that I heard that I wasn't really expecting to hear was that something that she learned from me wasn't content, it was how I listen to students. And I wasn't expecting that answer from her, that it really matters to me that when someone is speaking, that I'm not just hearing them and waiting for my turn to talk, that I'm actually listening to what's coming out of their mouth, that I'm actually taking in their ideas, and I'm not just waiting to correct them or waiting to say my piece, that I care about what they have to say. And I like to think I move through the world that way, that I'm genuinely interested in how people think and how it connects to what they learned before and where they take that bridge next. And if we want there to be a sense of belonging starts with being heard.
Well said. And next up, Liesl, you have the floor.
Hi. When I think about belonging, I imagine students just having this unconscious need and craving of like wanting to answer the question, do I fit in here? Do I belong here? Is there a space for me at this table? Am I part of this in-group of math people, or people who can do math, people who are accepted here? Or am I an outsider in this math space, or like not a math person, as some might say? As someone who translates cognitive neuroscience for schools, I see belonging as a two-sided coin. On one side of the coin is representation. This is the student side of the coin, that students must be able to be in math spaces and be in the world and look out and be able to see people who share different identifying markers with them, who are out there just kicking butt, doing some cool stuff with math or some math adjacent things. Representation matters so much for our students to be able to see people who share their language, who share their ethnic background, who share their gender, who share their all sorts of different identifiers, and say, hey, that person's just like me, and they're doing cool stuff with math. I can do that too. That facilitates a sense of belonging. The other side of the coin is the teacher side of the coin that I wish we could talk about a little bit more. And the teacher side of the coin is, does the teacher see all students in their class as having a space at the math table? And that requires teachers doing all of us, that requires us doing some real hard internal work to sift through and squash any biases that we might bring to our work, to make sure that we have high expectations for all of our students, that we believe that all of our students are capable of doing math at high levels. And when you have both sides of those coins satisfied, students who can access representation, teachers who believe all students can do math, then we've created a space where belonging is flourishing. When those two sides of the coins are not being met, then students are experiencing a really stressful experience, like literally stress, like cortisol is released in the brain and the body. It creates a stressful experience that not only makes cognition difficult, but also starts to impact their physical, mental, and emotional health. So it's more than just like a feel-good belonging thing. Like, I'm here to say this matters because it hurts their brain and their body and their heart when we don't prioritize belonging.
Beautiful. And then lastly, we have Melissa. Melissa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This actually follows perfectly, well, I think perfectly out of what Lisa just talked about. And I think one of the things we can't overlook is that many of our students get their impressions about whether they belong in the math class based on what their grades tell them. And I think that there has been a long history of deficit-minded assessment practices in the math classroom particularly. And so our students have this feeling of, okay, math is here's all the things you can't do. And so I think one of the ways we have to shift our thinking as teachers in the math classroom is focusing on what kids can do in our assessment practices, and not focusing on the long list of gaps and things that are missing that kids are bringing. Because what's happening is they're feeling like I have a group of kids who are coming into a grade 9 math classroom who have been broken by their grades. They expect to fail. They bring that into the classroom with them because all they've ever been told is what they did wrong. And to echo Crystal's point, I think the right answer is important, but if all we're spending our time giving our feedback on is what the right answer is or what the wrong answer is, then that's what kids see that we value in the math classroom. And then they internalize that in themselves and think, I don't belong here. We do such a good job of ranking and sorting in our heads, even sometimes. I know I work on it in my classroom too, right? You look at your kids, you think, oh, that's the kid who got 90s in grade 8, and that's the kid who got 50s in grade 8. And now they're in my classroom together. We see that. But instead, what I want to say or to bring to the table is that this need for an asset-minded perspective in all the things that we do in our classrooms, but particularly with the way we give feedback to kids and help them on their journey of growth, because so much of what so many kids have experienced is just you don't measure up, and therefore they don't belong here.
Thank you all so much. This is why Chris and I love doing this episode so much. This is our collective TED Talk. But I do want to start because, and I think where I would like to start with for everybody, I want to play off of what Crystal was talking about. I want to give each of you a chance to talk to administration, and please speak directly to an administrator, whether you have one in mind or not, and let them know why belonging in math, in a math class, is so important, and why maybe that's where we should start in some cases. We're going to start actually with Shelby, and then we'll kind of loop around and we'll kind of ping pong a little bit. But Shelby, speak directly to an administrator.
So this is actually what I do in my day job is like, yes, I do PD and yes, I co-teach, but I think the most important part of my work is talking to administrators about the things that we do to unintentionally, maybe intentionally, I don't know, but the ways we shoot ourselves in the foot constantly, the way that we undermine our words with our actions. And I think the most important thing that an administrator needs to hear is math class doesn't necessarily look, sound, feel the way it did when you were a student. And if that is what you are evaluating a teacher on, if that is what you are basing a successful classroom on, your standards are out of date. And it's very easy to think that belonging doesn't belong in a math class if your perception of what math class should be is a place where you copy instructions, you input some numbers, you get out an answer, ta-da, you're done. Of course, belonging doesn't belong in a space like that because all you're doing is mass producing tiny robots. Once you start to shift what mathematics can and should be, what math instruction can and should be, there's no question that belonging is an absolutely critical component of that because you believe that everyone is capable of being a mathematician. You believe that everyone is capable of being confident in their mathematical ability. I don't care if they love it. That couldn't matter less to me. Like, I would like it if they loved it, but that's largely irrelevant. Can they do it and can they feel confident? How can you do that without a sense of belonging?
Bobson, from a classroom teacher perspective, speaking directly, doesn't have to be your administration, it's directly to an administrator. Why is belonging important?
I mean, belonging is important because if they feel like they shouldn't be there, nothing else that we do is going to matter. And I think, we when a lot of people think about belonging, they think about the emotional aspect of like, kind of the feel good, oh, you're welcome here. And that's great. That's awesome. That's important because without that emotional welcome, people will shut down. But there's also all the other support that makes you feel like you belong. And I think one thing I would say to administrators is that it's not enough to just put students into a classroom and then say to teachers, make them feel welcome. We also need to give students the support, the educational support so that they can actually succeed. We need to have high expectations for them. Of course, we have high expectations for them, but we also can't set them up for failure, right? I mean, we need to give them the time to succeed. We need to give them the flexibility, students and teachers, to succeed. And so I think too many teachers are in a position where they have a lot of constraints on them, or they have students who are really struggling, but the teachers are not given the support or the flexibility to help them succeed. And then everyone says, well, why are they failing? Aren't you making them feel, feeling welcome? And well, feeling welcome is great, but like, if they're struggling, I need more time to work with them. I need more support. And so, I think sometimes belonging and relationship building is unfortunately almost used as a weapon. And it's kind of a catch-all, you have too many students in your class, or, you have too many struggling students, just make them feel like they belong. It's like, it's not a magic wand. It's a starting point, but it's not the end point.
Exactly. And Melissa, speak to an admin.
Yeah, when I think about talking to my administration and working with the superintendents of my school division, I really want to echo something that Shelby talked about, which is about how math doesn't look the same way as it used to, maybe when they were in school, but also that this applies to the secondary math classroom too. So I worked for a lot of years as a middle years teacher, and having these conversations with my admin about what math classroom could be like and should feel like and look like and sound like At a grade 7 level or grade 8 level or grade 5 level, there was much more willingness to see it that way. And now I teach at the secondary level. And there is this impression about what secondary mathematics is supposed to be like. And so I would really want to say to my admin that mathematics at the secondary level can look and should look the same way. It should be a place where kids want to come. It should be a place where there's play and engagement and manipulatives and visuals and discussing and debating and collaborating and all of the things that we think of when we think of like a grade 2, 3 math classroom. Like that's what I grew up with seeing. And so if we're going to make change in that and thinking like, okay, like when they come to grade 9 or 10 or they're in the grade 12 pre-cal class, content is still secondary to helping our kids become better human beings. That's our job. We happen to do it through the math curriculum, but I really believe our job is to help kids learn how to be good people. And so I use my math content to help build that. But secondary mathematics should look the same way and have the same vibe.
Can I add on to something Melissa just said?
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that you named that, because I think that a lot of times what I've encountered is folks feeling like, well, I have to do it this way in 2nd grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, because next year's teacher or the next grade band is going to expect it to look like this. So I have to set them up for that expectation now, because later on, and so many times we are just unaware of what's going on with our colleagues in other grade bands. Like I had so many misconceptions about what high school looked like, about what elementary looked like, until I had a chance to go be in those classrooms. And so we're delivering messages about like, well, it's not going to be like it was for you in elementary, or this is what it's going to be like for you when you go to high school. And we're just kind of talking out of our butts, because unless you've been in those classrooms, you don't know. And we're impacting students off of assumptions.
Absolutely. And in the secondary classroom, we face it too, right? Well, you got to prepare them for university. How about I prepare them for being a person and how to live, right? And how to have a life outside of classrooms. And I'll do that through my math curriculum. Thank you very much. But it's not like, oh, well, they're going to sit and write exams in university. So that means in grade 9, they have to sit in rows and listen to you lecture and copy notes. Like, no, I just because a colleague once said to me, and then I'll stop talking. Just because the next level may be using bad pedagogy doesn't mean you should, right? Like just because it's going to happen there, like we have to be true to who we are as educators and what we firmly believe for our students. And so, I think just that whole notion of, well, it's not going to be this, the assumptions that we make about each other's, classrooms and grade bands. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we got to teach who we are and from our hearts.
This over to you.
Can I take the perspective of a parent talking to admin?
For sure.
Diversity there. So, Principal Watson. Hi, I'm a parent, and I'd love to talk to you about my child's experience at this wonderful school that you lead. And I just worry that my child and the class is missing out on my child's brilliance because of the way he feels during math time at school. We were just doing some math here at home earlier today, and he's like making up really complex problems and approaching them in really diverse ways. And it's just really a beautiful thing to witness. But when he's in school, he just doesn't feel like there's a place for him there. He doesn't feel like there's a place for his thinking there and the way he approaches math. And he feels othered. He doesn't feel like he fits in because he doesn't do things the same way that the teacher is showing things. And he just thinks things a little bit differently, but in a really, complex and abstract and beautiful, brilliant way. So I'm just wondering if we can have a conversation about how we can just kind of broaden the definition of how we perceive goodness in math, so that there's space for him, so he doesn't feel that he's left out or othered in math time.
What a wonderful take. That is a beautiful, beautiful take from a parent. And then, Crystal, Speak to your colleagues.
I mean, on top
Talk
of what
to
I
these
said,
people, Crystal.
now I'm new, so I'm new to admin. I will be the first person to say that, but I'll just say that in my little bit of time, my year and some days, or years and a couple months as admin, um, part of belonging is that community piece, right? And so if anybody has seen me speak or heard me speak about the 5 factors of belonging, I got that from children. Like I got it from 7th and 8th graders, 11 and 12-year-olds, maybe 13. And the one thing that kept coming up was the part about community and inclusion. And I would ask a lot of questions like, what do you mean by that? What is community? And community has a level of accountability. So I think belonging, I've really been sitting with what Bobson and Lisa were saying about the feel good part of, oh, you belong here. I love you. That should go without being said, because I should be showing you I love you with high expectations, with following up with good feedback, with helping you grow, helping you see and be able to track the way that you grow, and you being able to give feedback constructively to your peers and be able to receive that, right? So I think that accountability piece is often missed when we're talking about belonging, because like they said, it's like we want kids to feel good. It doesn't always feel good, and you still feel like you belong there. It's like, think about your family. You fight with your family and you still come home because you love it there, right? So I just really want my admin folks to really think about, what does it look like to hold accountability for our buildings in order for it to trickle down, right, to the classroom level and then student to student level. And I would, let me push warm demander, right? So that accountability, but with the in love, right? So my deputy superintendent, Dr. Alicia Smith, always, that's her motto, lead with love. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Lead with love, and you will see belonging build.
Okay, well, thanks for that admin take. I want to take it down to the teacher level here, and because I was really just loving how much you all brought up teacher self-care, and having admin listen to teachers, and when teachers feel they belong, right? Students feel they belong, and so the emphasis on teacher came out in a bunch of your opening statements there. And so I'm just curious, especially we are recording this after the 2024 U.S. election and all that is going on in the world. On top of that, just from even before that, for educators, all the pressure on their shoulders, just any advice or thoughts you have for teachers to help them with the self-care, with the sense of belonging, with helping their colleagues feel they belong, or things along those lines. And I'm going to open the floor to anyone who wants to jump in first.
I think one of the things I have found, and I can't speak to self-care after your election. I can say that I probably know more about your past election that you just had than you know about my upcoming election. But one of the things I have noticed is super powerful when working with my colleagues. I get the amazing privilege of leading staff professional learning for an hour every week in my building. And that is the power of a name, and calling our colleagues by their first names. And whenever someone shares in discussion, when I see people in the hallway, whether, we're talking about grading practices or, global competencies in our classrooms, whenever someone shares something, I thank them by name. And I say, thank you for sharing. And I use their first name. And I think we get into the habit of, and this is something that's really simple maybe, but I know in the past, I would have called my colleagues by Mr. or Mrs. by their teacher name. And I think we miss out sometimes on the recognition of our colleagues as not their teacher name, as who they are as people. And so when I think about building community in my building as someone who is not a leader by title, but maybe a leader by example, using our first names and acknowledging the presence of each other in the building and in the staff rooms and in our professional learning, that has had huge gains for changing shifting the culture in the building that I work in right now. Because we have had a very collegial but not perhaps collaborative culture in our building. And so acknowledging each other as who we are as people, it may be a small thing, but I think it has big payoff.
I want to throw out another idea, which is something I mentioned earlier and something I've been thinking about a lot, especially in the last week, is that as classroom teachers, I think have a lot of classroom teachers I know have this mindset of, I am in my classroom. This is where I control the domain. And no matter what's going on outside, I will just close the door and do my own thing. And I think, especially with this last election, it should be pretty clear to everyone that we can no longer just close the door and ignore what's going on outside, no matter how you feel about it. What's going on outside the classroom is affecting what's going on inside, whether it's students that are feeling anxious about their status, their home, or whether, students who are feeling triumphant or students who are feeling angry. We cannot just close the door to our classroom and do our own thing. And I think the other thing that I think about is that as teachers, we can no longer just think, well, I can just carry on by myself. That we really all need to find our support systems out there, whether it's local math circles, whether it's local state math ed organizations. And I know that a lot of these organizations are flawed spaces. I mean, let's be honest. They're not perfect. But they are the only spaces that are out there. And if we don't take control of them, somebody else will. And where does that leave us? And we cannot depend on ourselves and maybe these volunteer communities that spring up on social media to support us, because they come and go. We need to look at the structure that is really harming us as teachers and students, and see and ask ourselves, what can we do to change those structures to make this profession more sustainable?
I just want to say thank you to Melissa and Bobson, as two that are still in the classroom doing this work and during this time, because even as an admin, I didn't have to face necessarily students all day long the day after the election. But I found it so rewarding to go to school the day after the election. And my building is 99% Black. So, and most of my families and students are experiencing complex traumas and or poverty. Not all of them, we're not a monolith, but I expected it to be so much heavier, because I remember last time he was elected, I was in the classroom and I had 7th and 8th graders, and it was just, we couldn't go on. We literally had the day just to talk. But I remember waking up the day after the election, and as trash as I was feeling, I got up, I put a suit on that day. I made sure my makeup, like I beat my face that morning. And I went in and I was in classrooms all day long. Like I was with kids all day long. And it was not until I got home that night to be like, shit, we're in quite the conundrum here. But it sounds, I love what Bobson and Melissa both said. I think from an admin standpoint, what we'd love to have is more teachers come to us and tell us what you need, because we want to know. At least the good ones of us, we want to know. And it's not that we want to hold it against you, or we want to bring it up later on, or we want to put it in your evaluation or whatever. We want to know what you need so that we can get it for you. And whatever that means, or whatever that looks like for you. So if you don't want to give up your planning time and you need me to get you some support so that I can pull you for a little bit to get some support, I will do that. Like, and just trust your admin until they show you that you can't trust them, right? And I know that's a large ask, but in this situation, I feel like we're gonna have to find trust in one another, because we're sharing space, and we're responsible for other people's babies, period. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's what both of you just said was like everything, and I'm taking that with me for sure.
Shelby or Liesel, do you want to jump in? Yeah.
This is a really big, heavy, hard question
Yeah, sorry.
about what does belonging look like in the state of the United States, the election, and the implications around the globe. What I think about when I try to step out of my emotions for a moment and try to be more cerebral, I think about how in psychology we talk about in groups and out groups, and how as humans we just naturally, like birds of a feather, flock together. That's just how we are wired. And 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 we see this, in non-consequential contexts, like Yankees fans versus Mets fans. Okay. We also see it in the political landscape with Republicans and Democrats, that if you are the lone Democrat in a community of Republicans, you feel like an outsider. And that community could be your own family, it could be your town, it could be in your country. And so as our politics become more and more polarized, there is literally, approximately half of the country that maybe, before last week didn't feel like they belonged or seen or valued or known. And now there is another half of the country that feels like they don't belong, that they aren't seen, that their values aren't upheld, and their wishes and dreams known. And like I personally felt this the first time he was elected. My husband and I had just moved back to the United States from Denmark, and we didn't understand really the political context of what was going on, the whole scene. And we, like, that was our response. Wow, like we didn't feel like we belonged in what we considered our home country. And it's a really strange feeling. And I think the stress that many people are feeling, well, about half the country are feeling right now, is a feeling of not belonging. Like, oh my gosh, if this is what the country values, I don't feel like I belong. And so what I would say to that is what I say to myself, and what I'm trying to work through is like belongingness is such a basic human need. It is so basic. Without belongingness, like I said, it's really stressful, and it harms us cognitively, physically, emotionally. And so one is, where can I find a sense of belonging? Where can I find community for myself as a teacher? Where is my community, and find that? I think Bobson was alluding to that. Not alluding, was like really being explicit in finding that. And then as our role as a teacher in our own classroom, we define the in-group in our classrooms. Teachers define the in-group. And that is our work to do, is to draw the lines of the in-group to make sure that it includes every single human being that walks into our classroom, that they know that in this space, they belong. In this space, there's room for you. In this space, you are seen, known, valued, loved. And all the things that you hope and dream for, there is space for that in this community. And then we find it for ourselves as adults, and then we work like hell to create it for everyone else in this country and beyond.
So I've been thinking a lot about this question, and I was at dinner with some friends this weekend, and, we did the customary "how are yous?" and then we answered honestly. And that's something that I think, depending on where you are in the country, like the question, "how are you?" is just expected to be like a social ritual of like, "How are you? Not too bad." And then you move on. But in this moment, we were just honest about how we were actually doing, about the roller coasters that we were on. And I think the key to building community is to find the people who care about your answer when they ask you that question. And so I had to go deliver PD on the Wednesday after, and that sucked. It was not, I was not super confident in how that was going to go. But what I ultimately landed on was to let people know, look, my priority today is your humanity and your well-being. And what that's going to look like for me is I'm going to be relying on my notes more. But what that looks like for you is, if you need to step out, if you need to disengage, if you need to take care of something else, do that. Take care of you. But if what you need is 90 minutes to not think about the state of the world, then cool, I'll provide that. And what I'm realizing is it shouldn't take the world getting tilted off its axis for me to show up like that. That should be how I show up every single day. And that's how we should show up for each other every single day, that my priority is your well-being. My priority is that you're good and what I need to do to show up for you so you can be good. So that's something that's still kind of swirling in my brain of how do I hold what feels sometimes like opposing ideas of holding high expectations and also holding care for your well-being, and do those things have to be in conflict? And when they are, what's the way forward? And I think the way forward for me has to be just caring about people's humanity.
Okay, and then my next question, I want to bring it back into the classroom and just think about the day-to-day of students and of lessons. And Melissa, I'm curious about this textbook lesson that you talked about earlier. And maybe I'll start with you, Melissa. But I'm curious, if I gave you all superpowers, like we're in the Marvel movies, and you drank the juice that gets you a magical power, what would you change and do in the classrooms to really make them like this belonging ideal that you're dreaming of? So Melissa, I'll start with you.
Wow. One of the things I'm learning as my career goes on is, the more I do this, the less that I know. And that's really what it feels like. And so, but if I could do one thing in the magical world of Marvel, I wish that I could meet each kid exactly where they need to be, where they're at. So I have a bit of a unique, well, not a bit of a, we have an option for some of our grade 8 students transitioning into grade 9 to take a course that's called Transitional Mathematics rather than the standard grade 9 math course. In Manitoba, where I teach, grade 9 math is not streamed. So everybody just takes a grade 9 math credit, but we have this optional course. And so that course is populated with kids who feel like they don't belong in the math classroom. And so what I have to do each day is look at each one of them as an individual and provide the structure or not that kid needs that day in that moment. And so one of the things I'm learning to do that is that, as we've talked about, of course, relationships come along with it, but we talk about, getting to know our students, but knowing where each kid's, I'm a big fan of, as I mentioned earlier before we started recording, of Vanessa Beccaria and her work around math therapy, math trauma. And I have this group of kids that breaks my heart every day because they have been traumatized by mathematics, and they bring that with them into the classroom. And so every day I work to make sure that and the biggest heart for me, the place I think we need to, well, there's lots of places we need to start, but I do really believe that there is a bigger connection between belonging and our assessment practices in our math classrooms than we sometimes are willing to talk about. And so if I could make learning just about learning, and the thing I would get rid of would be evaluation and and grades and ranking and sorting, and it would be about, what did you bring into the classroom with you today? Where are you at? Let's do a problem. Let's just sit and chat math. Let's grow together. But we have to work in the system, as we've talked about before. And so for some kids, it means they need a structured approach, and some kids need the freedom to just play with the manipulators on Polypad for a day and see what they can discover or just experience. So as a classroom teacher, that's the burden that I feel is on my shoulders, is meeting those kids where they're at, and making sure that what I'm doing as what my teacher moves are, and this goes to like working with our colleagues too, for those of us who help lead PD, right? Like, what movies am I making, and do my teacher moves signal that you are in this space and that there is space for you, that I recognize your humanness today, and that we're about flourishing together. So, yeah, I wish that I had 30 of me to sit with each kid and just know and let them have a space to be seen and heard and loved and like that I'm there to listen to you and your story. And that's who I am as your math teacher. I'm here for your story. I'm part of it. I'm a little part of your story today. And we're all together part of each other's story. And I have this colleague who's doing his master's on human connection. And he said commented to me the other day that he has realized that every interaction we have with each person, we come away as a different person. So by sitting here tonight with you all at the end of this, I will leave as a different person than I was when I started. And I think the same for you guys. I think you will all leave here different people. Our students come into our classroom, and I'm getting a little emotional about thinking about it, right? They will leave as different people than when they walked into the classroom. So how are we providing the classroom environment so that who they are changed into is a flourishing person? So yeah, I could talk for a long time. I talk way too much. You can cut that out too much. That's what's on my heart right now, just as you asked that question.
Sure. How about Crystal? Do you want to jump in and talk about students and what magical things you would make the classroom look like for belonging for them?
I feel like Melissa just kind of painted the picture, right? I think, Melissa, what you just did was humanize my experience, I would say, for sure. As a classroom teacher, as a coach, as an admin, just kind of watching. For me, if I had a magic wand, I would do that. I would get rid of like all the high stakes the high stakes things that are chosen to be focused upon by folks that have no idea what it looks like and feels like and sounds like to be in the classroom. Assessment is good, right? Formative assessments, summative assessments, they're all good, but they should be different, classroom to classroom, student to student. And I know that sounds so idealistic, but I shouldn't have, thousands of students sitting for the same state test for that grade level based on what somebody said they needed to know, right? And I can tell you, like, I went through high school math just fine, like kindergarten all the way to 12. And I can't tell you when I last used quadratics. And that's like the biggest thing that you take on the Algebra 1 state test. That's one of the largest items. I don't need to know when to land or how to land a rocket. I don't need to know whether a rainbow is a quadratic or a semicircle, even though that's very interesting to look into that. It's all fun, and you should be able to have fun with that and play with it and be excited about learning about it. Not because you're like, oh, well, this might be on the test. Let me make sure I'm taking notes, and my notes might not be right, and yada, yada, yada. Again, why I go back to letting kids try again. And I would say, if we're going to have these high stakes things, let's make sure that kids get to try again. I remember back in what were they called? Where we had to take like the different content tests in 9th grade. Do you all remember that? Okay. Well, in Ohio, we had to take these different content tests in 9th grade. You took math, science, ELA, and if you passed it, you didn't have to take them again. But if you didn't pass it, you got to take them over and over and over again until you graduate. If we're going to do something like that, I guess I would go back to that, but I would literally abolish it all if I could and just make math a place where we get to explore whatever world in whatever context we're in. It'd be project-based. We'd have, it would just be amazing. I had a student reach out to me the other day because I said her name in a podcast, and she reached out and she said, I still remember you telling us, like, who cares about the right answer? Just show me what you're thinking, what your example is. She was like, and I still can't stand percents to this day. But because I wanted her to just let go of that anxiety about, is it right or wrong? I want you to show me, what does a percent mean to you in the context of your learning and your living? So that's the kind of conversations that I want to have. And I don't want somebody to come back, well, you were only 37% of your students were shown proficient on this test at the end of the year, when I have all these receipts that these babies grew, just not in a way that you wanted to see it.
Mm-hmm. How about Lisa, perhaps from a parent perspective, if you want to chime in?
Oh, fun. Okay. Ask the question again. Let me see if I can switch hats.
Just thinking about the student to student, like day to day, like what if you had magical powers and you could change things, what would you want the ideal classroom lesson, day to day kind of stuff look like?
Okay, I'm gonna take two sides here. One, if I had a magic wand, abracadabra, alakazam, no, marbles don't say that. Okay, whatever marbles say, I would first give the teacher some magical power in their eyes to be able to see the brilliance beholden in every child, like to be able to see the brilliance inherent in every child. I would grant that teacher ears to be able to hear the needs, the unconscious need of each individual student in order for them to feel safe to share that brilliance. And I would give if I'm talking from a parent perspective, I give my kid's teacher the voice to be able to speak, just to speak love and appreciation for each unique idea that comes into that class. That's what I'd give the teacher. What I'd give to my child is I'd give my child a sense of safety, the courage to speak up and to share their truth. And I mean, if it's true, the gift, like the magical power of like feeling safe to share their unique voice in that space. And to just like and to play and to explore and to be curious. And for all of that to be accepted and welcomed in that space. That's what I'd love, which requires like getting rid of algorithms, not getting rid of, but like getting rid of like this algorithm-based teaching, which requires probably more time than most teachers in classrooms have. But that's what I would wish for.
Beautiful. Getting rid of algorithms, an upcoming debate next season. Bobson, how about you? What is your take on what things you would, in the ideal world, what would you make happen?
I think if I could drink that magic polyjuice potion and have these magical powers, I think I want to echo what everyone else has said earlier. Meeting students where they are, what Melissa was talking about, and making instruction more personal. I would sit down and rewrite the curriculum and rewrite the standards so that we as teachers actually have the space and the time to build relationships with students and to let students play and to let students struggle productively. As a teacher, I can't tell you how many times I have to march through a lesson because I have another lesson to do tomorrow and I can't fall behind because I've worked out the calendar for the whole year and I have to get to the end by May 15th in order for me to prepare for the assessment at the end of the year. And if we had fewer topics in the year so that we could go more in depth so that students could actually learn the topic correctly the first time so that I don't have to reteach it from scratch or reteach it for some kids. And then we wouldn't have kids kind of struggling as much. We wouldn't have to worry about you don't know how to do Algebra 1 and you're sitting in my Algebra 2 class. Let students learn Algebra 1 the first time. And then we don't have to have these debates about should it be in 8th grade? Should it be in 9th grade? Let them learn it the first time. And then, we can build relationships. We can talk about equity. We can talk about culturally responsive teaching. We have space and time for all this because so many teachers say, oh, I don't have time for that. And as discouraging as it sounds, they have a point that when we have all this content, how do we fit all of this in? And the solution is I think, is to really rethink what we want to teach. And when we rewrite these standards and curricula, I mean, don't just trust it to me. Get a whole bunch of classroom teachers sitting down and kind of, forming the core of this committee that actually works this out. And I mean, get college professors involved, get teachers, get parents involved, get students involved, get everyone involved. But make it so that the people in the classroom actually can say, yeah, that's going to work, or no, that's not going to work, and have that drive the conversation.
And Shelby, with a cat on her lap, would you like to weigh in?
I think my magic wand potion wish would be for genuine curiosity. Because I think so many times, because we are feeling the pressures of time, because we are feeling the pressures of assessment, because we are feeling the pressures of school board members being elected, because we're feeling the pressures of budgets, we bypass curiosity in service of accusations and answers. And I think if we started with curiosity, then we maybe wouldn't have to spend so much time being defensive, because we would know if someone's asking me a question, they're asking it because they want to know the answer, not because they're looking for an excuse to get me. And that applies to teachers, that applies to students, that applies to administrators, that applies to parents and guardians. Like if we genuinely cared about the answers to people's questions instead of setting them up for a gotcha, we might be in a better spot, because folks have reasons why they do the things that they do. And sometimes the reason is, I only had 20 minutes to eat and pee today, and I had to make some choices about how to move through my day. That could be true for the kids as much as it can be for the adults. Sometimes the choice is, my little sister was up all night and I had to take care of her, and so I didn't have an opportunity to do what you asked me to do. Again, that could be true for kids or adults. If we led from a place of curiosity and genuine care for other people's well-being, then maybe we might get somewhere. But I don't have a magic wand, and I can't convince people to care about others. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. Like I don't know what the magic solution is to just convince people to care about other people.
Okay, on that
Sorry,
note,
we went real dark there for a second, but that's where I'm at.
that's okay. I think a bunch of us have moments of that, at least right now in this time. But I think that's a good spot to kind of end our conversation here. I'm going to pause for a second to have listeners just reflect and think about their takeaways from this.
This was such a wonderful, deep, rich conversation. And just thank you all. I said it earlier. This is Chris and I's collective TED Talk about belonging. And you've given us so much to think about as we're wrapping up 2024, looking into 2025 with this episode. Thank you so much.
And I think it was Melissa, you said every interaction we have, we come away a different person. So I hope that we are all walking away from this a different person. And our listeners, I hope you as well. Shelby, you want to add something?
I do, because I don't want to end on that note. I'm thinking a lot about what Melissa said about coming away as different people. And I think that as frustrated as I get, that's also the thing that gives me hope, is that when I see people come together and acknowledge each other, when I see people come together and be genuinely curious about each other, about our circumstances, about what we have going on in our lives, when I see folks care for one another and have a conversation where they might not be in perfect alignment, but they can look in the same direction together and say, here's the part that I play, here's the part that you play, and here's how we move forward. That's what gives me hope, because it is very easy to despair. It is very easy to get sunk in wishing the world was different. But the only way that happens is when we show up and we model what it looks like to care, and we model what it looks like to be curious, and we model what it looks like to be in community with one another. That does the same way that a kid's not going to know how to turn and talk unless you explicitly teach them how and you model what that looks like and you model your expectations. That goes for everything else in the world too. We create a world where we care about each other by being the model of what that looks like. And I think that's an awesome responsibility that all of us share. And I feel super confident that we have the ability to rise to that occasion. So there's my positivity. Now I'm feeling better about myself.
Well, and Shelby, I want to add one more thing as we're wrapping up to it and sending it off to everybody. As math educators, and I've said this for a long time, we don't just teach math, we teach kids how to be great humans. And whether it's the standards of mathematical practice or the content that we teach, like the community of a math classroom, having students truly believe and feel that they belong in a math classroom, it doesn't stop at the doors that they walked in. You go outside of those doors and there's a whole world out there that if we do our jobs as math educators, we're creating great humans. And that's a large part of the Debate Math podcast that, Chris and I talk about. Debate isn't just, it's not this negative connotation. It's a structured conversation with reasoning. And we're trying to promote that more and more. And I truly believe that as math educators, like our charge is to make great humans. And each day we have 30 humans, up to 30 humans or more in a class, and then they leave, and then we got another 30 plus coming in, and for those who are in a consulting role, you get to go into different schools where we're impacting, hundreds to thousands of kiddos every day with the adults that are in there helping change their lives. So that, ending again, just kind of piggybacking on what everybody said, I truly believe that. And I think that's why, Chris and I have ventured out into the Debate Math podcast, and why, math educators are probably the dopest humans out there, truly. So
on that note, let's wrap up. How about Melissa? Where can listeners find you and reach out to you and talk more with you?
Well, I'm still kicking around on the dumpster fire that is Twitter. So that's probably the best place to find me. At Dean of Math is my Twitter handle. But I'm also on Instagram at the same handle, and I do have a blog that's called the Dean of Math. So if you do a Google search, you'll find that there too. Those are the best places to find me. Shoot me off a message. I love to chat with people and talk and be in community. That's why I am on social media, for that reason. So that's where you can find me.
Wonderful. And we'll put all those in our show notes. And Lisa, where can listeners reach out to you?
Same, I guess. Currently, I'm most active on Twitter. A combination of math education, the brain, and other advocacy work that I'm involved in. Might be converting over to Blue Sky for my math work. We'll see. Might experiment with that. So check me out. But I'm also on other platforms. But my website, lieselmakanji.com, lots of great resources there that are free and available for teachers, as well as just reaching out to me via email.
Shelby, where can listeners find you?
While I am also still in the dumpster fire, I would like you to join me somewhere over the rainbow where skies are blue. It's lovely over there. We're refinding one another. We're reconnecting. It's great. Come over to Blue Sky. Snuffle up, I guess, basically anywhere where you can find me. It's like Big Bird's Invisible Friend, but with an E instead of a U. Snuffle up, I guess. You can also find me at my website, strongermath.com, and basically just find some tall ginger Amazon and shout, "Hey, you," and it's probably me.
Hey, Crystal.
I love the tall ginger Amazon for us, because those of us that have hugged her and then seen me next to her, it's like tall and small. For those of you that don't know, I'm all of 5'1". I'm a big personality, but I'm tiny. Anyway, you can get a hold of me. I am also still in the dumpster fire, but I have requested my data be downloaded. So I'm currently packing my bags. I am on Blue Sky. I am on Instagram. I am on Threads. Really just out here blowing in the wind at this point. Like, where am I going to land? I'm not sure. But I'm a collective person, so I need my community. Twitter has been my community since I started teaching. So I'm grieving a little bit. And I'm kind of holding on just in case Cuban buys Twitter and then the current dude doesn't own it. But you can also go to my website, which is being updated. So bear with me. It's crystalmwatson.com. And info at crystalmwatson.com if you would like to email. I'm a responder. So feel free.
And Bobson, where can listeners find you?
I am also on that dumpster fire of Twitter, but I too made the migration to Blue Sky, and the air is cleaner. The ads are non-existent. It is the only social media platform mentioned that actually does not have any ads. I'm also on Instagram, post some fun pictures there. And I do have a website, bobsonwong.com.
Wonderful. Thank you all for this great debate. Want to learn more about incorporating debate activities into your math classroom? Go to luzniak.com/podcast to sign up for my mailing list and get your first set of example debate activities you could use with your students today. Go to luzniak.com/podcast.
Don't forget to reach out to us with comments and questions on debatemath.com or follow us on Twitter at debatemathpod and follow along with #debatemathpod.
Rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts.
Or wherever you listen to this podcast. Your feedback is super important to us.
Well, that's all from us.
Looking forward to debating with you more next episode. Until next time, cheers.